As we count down exactly 1 year until the next provincial election, the leader of the NDP may very well have two different expressions in her head. This will be the third time she leads her party into political battle. Will it be third time's the charm or three strikes and you're out? Let's find out. From Andrea Horwath, leader of the Ontario New Democrats and the MPP for Hamilton Centre, and we welcome you back into that chair here at TVO. I want to just get a little touchy-feely off the top here and ask you what you think you know today that you didn't know 2 elections ago that you think prepares you better to be Premier today if that were to happen a year from today.
Well, I mean, for one thing, I've certainly listened to a heck of a lot of Ontarians between when I first became leader and today. I've gotten a sense of where people are at, what their thoughts and concerns and worries are, and that's always been my priority, frankly. But I mean, the other piece that I have is the experience of having been a leader through a couple of campaigns now. The Minority Parliament, I think, was an opportunity for me to learn a lot more about how you work to actually affect real change, having the power to do so in that kind of scenario. So that gives me a lot of insight into the workings of government, if you will, when you're more at the table than not, as simply a third party leader.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a great deal that I've come to learn over the years, but I go back to the fact that it's for me, it's always about people and listening to people and finding the ways to come up with ideas and solutions to the concerns that they have in their daily lives.
There's every possibility it could be, I mean, who knows, right? It's a year away. So, I mean, it's possible it could be a minority government next time out as well. And who knows whose minority government it might be. But just give us a better understanding. Those 3 years when Dalton McGuinty was Premier and you held the balance of power in the legislature, how do you negotiate your way around all of that to, as you would put it, be able to put the people's agenda first?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, if you recall, I mean, the other opposition party decided they weren't going to play ball. I mean, they decided they didn't win, and that was the end of it for them. They were going to sit on the sidelines and whine and complain and not do anything at all to fulfill the desire of the people. The desire of the people was a minority parliament, and that's what we had been, given to work with. And so we worked hard to try to make a difference. And it was really all about that. It was about trying to wrestle from the government gains for people, gains for Ontarians. So everything from extra funding, for example, for small community hospitals in a time when the government was not funding them appropriately, to in fact, Kathleen Wynne and I negotiated one of those deals as well, if you recall. And that was the big piece there was auto insurance. Remember, that was a stretch goal. Though she, on the one hand, said that she would do it if she was, to get us through that budget. And then, of course, here we are, how many years later, we still don't have auto insurance. That's gone down by 15%. It was one of those stretch goals. But I mean, so what it does, though, what that minority parliament did was it really helped to, even off the relationship, if you will, between the Premier and the party that was prepared to work with them to try to make the province operate in between elections.
Let me put you in a weird spot here, because Kathleen Wynne has
led.
Kathleen Wynne has led one province-wide campaign, and you have led 2 province-wide campaigns, and Patrick Brown has never led a province-wide campaign. Mm-hmm. You having been through it, what would you recommend he needs to know right now?
Oh, well, you know what? He's going to have to learn his way through it on his own. I mean, I have no sense that I can give him any particular advice. It's certainly...
what are the hard lessons learned the first time out?
It's a long process. I mean, it seems short. You think, well, it's a 28-day campaign, but in fact, that 28 days is jam-packed, and the campaign starts far before 28 days. In fact, we've literally started already, as you know, to put some of our policy pieces out there, because I believe that leadership is about, telling people what you're going to do and then actually doing it.
You have put some policy out, and we will get to that in a second. But I mean, some might argue that the campaign has, in some respects, already begun, in as much as we had a by-election in Sault Ste. Marie last week. And I presume you are disappointed at the fact that the public clearly wanted an alternative to the Liberals and they picked the Conservatives instead of you guys. What lessons did you take from that?
Well, I mean, we worked really hard on that campaign. I'm certainly proud of my candidate, Joe Krimpatic. She did a fantastic job, and our volunteers did a great job on the campaign. But, you know, by-elections are interesting. I mean, in this by-election, people were wanting to just send a strong message to Kathleen Wynne. And, of course, you know, the government fell to third, quite a bit
bad
back,
third.
quite a bit
Yeah.
back. We did fairly well. Yes, you're right. We didn't come through the finish line at the top, which we were hoping to do. But look, next year is a whole different ballgame. I mean, this by-election was about sending that strong message to the government by changing a seat in the legislature. The next election is about changing the government, and I think people will have quite a different choice to make at that point.
Sure, but they chose to send that strong message to the government through a different vehicle.
Sure.
And not through you. And you guys had held the seat more recently than the Conservatives had, who haven't held it since 1981. Do you know why they would have chosen that different vehicle as opposed to you?
Well, I mean, again, it's not something that we were happy to see, but I'm really proud of Joe. I think he did a great job, our candidate. The folks chose to send, you know, a Conservative to the legislature in the interim. I think that our strong showing in that election gives us a chance to show the people of Sault Ste. Marie and frankly all of Ontario that when it comes to the next election, if they don't want to see the Liberals in office, they have a serious choice to make. And that's why we're putting a lot of our ideas out there, because we think that it's important that people know what it is that they're buying, if you will, what it is that they're getting into. And we have Mr. Brown, who's really, even through that campaign, was not very upfront about what his plans are, what his intentions are, what his policy ideas are, where he stands on pretty much anything.
Ms. Horwath, I watch Question Period every day. That's how boring my life is.
Say.
And you know what I've noticed over the last many months that I've been watching?
What's that?
We've got a little clip pack here, okay? Let's roll this, please.
Will this Premier and the Liberal Party admit that mandating politically motivated, politically convenient inserts to be included in people's hydro bills during an election campaign is just too far to go, even for the Liberals? As I recall, it was the Canadian Association of Retired Persons, it was seniors across the province, it was New Democrats that forced them to back down from increasing prescription costs for seniors. That's what was in their initial budget, Speaker. I think the minister forgets.
Okay, one of the things that you seem to be lately is a lot angrier. Is that an incorrect inference on my part?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's anger so much as it's frustration. I hear from people of Ontario all the time. Folks are hitting a tipping point. They're frustrated. They don't believe that the government is hearing them and understanding what they're going through. I mean, folks are at a situation where the cost of everything, hydro included, hydro especially, is going up.
Well,
Wages
hydro's coming down 25%.
Well, we'll see. Only to go up again in a couple of years' time is what the Financial Accountability Officer was pretty clear about. So that relief is going to be very, very short term, and the system won't be changing. The electricity system's not changing. So the mess that the Liberals have made of hydro is just going to continue to exist, and we're just going to be paying more for it because they're going to stretch the cost of paying for it for over a longer period of
Sure.
time. But look, you know, that's what's frustrating. And, you know, even, you know, when I go across the province, I mean, here in Toronto, when I hear from people, the sense is one of extreme disappointment in this Premier, in Kathleen Wynne.
Based on what?
Well, based on what they tell me. Why? They tell me that, you know, she was one person or Premier before the election and turned into something totally different after the election. And they're very, very disappointed. Around the province, though, in ridings outside of the general Toronto area, they're angry. They're angry, they're mad as hell, and they're quite tired of Kathleen Wynne and the Liberal government.
Well, let me ask if there's some anger on your part, because now you guys came out with, you know, what looked like a very thoughtful plan on a pharmacare option that you advanced. And then they kind of scooped you in their own budget, and they put out a different plan, which, you know, you could argue which one's better than the other. I've heard experts on both sides. Are you kind of ticked off that they stole some of your thunder on that?
Well, you know what? We are going to continue to put our ideas out there because it's what's good for Ontarians. I mean, the people of Ontario deserve a pharmacare plan, frankly, that you don't have to worry about how old you are or how much money you make to be able to qualify for it.
Yours covers everybody.
Ours covers everybody, whereas the government...
Fewer drugs, but more people.
Well, initially. I mean, the other thing that you can't forget is, you know, the Liberal plan, when you're 24 years old, you qualify the minute you're 25 years old, you no longer get your prescription drugs. Think about all those people leaving post-secondary education right around that age. They are not going to be eligible for the drug coverage. Some of them had that in university or college. They won't be able to get it afterwards. People in their 30s and their 40s and their 50s, people who, for example, who are needing HIV drugs, they're not going to be eligible unless they're under 24 or under.
So their plan that may cover thousands more different medications, but only till age 25, you feel is inferior to yours.
Extremely so, but also, I mean, let's remember thousands of more medications, the vast majority of which would never be prescribed for youth and for children. And so, again, the Liberals like to put a lot of numbers out there that make their plan look really great. But one of the important things that it doesn't do, other than the fact that it doesn't cover everyone, which ours does, is that it doesn't provide us with that buying power that will help us to wrestle down the cost of drugs with the pharmaceutical companies. I mean, this is one of the big problems that we have in Ontario and across Canada. And our plan, covering 14 million people with a set budget, gives us exactly that bargaining power and will help us to get the cost of drugs down. And the initial 125 or so drugs is exactly that. It's the initial amount of drugs, which will cover 70% of the drugs that are prescribed for the most common ailments that people have. And so it's quite a comprehensive plan, and it's one, again, that deals with the system problems that we have with pharmaceuticals, and in that they're high in cost because we don't have much bargaining power to get those costs down. Our plan does that.
Let's return to the electricity file for a second, and you've told us what you thought of the Liberal plan, that despite advertising a 25% reduction, you think, obviously, in the years ahead, that the rates are going to come back up. I want to ask you more about your plan, because if I understand it, you would like the province of Ontario to sort of reacquire for public ownership Hydro One, which is the sort of wires company, right? The one that distributes all the electricity out there. How would you purport to do that?
Well, look, it's very clear online. I mean, and anybody can go online to look at both our pharmacare plan and our hydro plan. We're going to use the remaining dividends from Hydro One that we receive every year, which of course have been whittled down because the government is now giving those dividends away to private shareholders. But we're going to use those remaining dividends to buy back the shares. We know that that's going to be dependent in terms of how long it's going to take on a number of things. One is the share price at the time when we form government. The other is, of course, the fact that now the government has sold off the last tranche, and so now they've sold off more than 50%. Yeah,
right.
more than 50%.
So it's probably going to cost, what, $300-400 million to buy back all the shares?
Well, that depends on the share price. And so what we've said on our plan, which is online, is that the length of time it will take us will be determined by the number of shares or the amount of shares sold off at the time the plan goes into effect and the share price at the time.
What is the value in doing that?
Well, basically, it brings back into public hands the Crown Corporation that Kathleen Wynne had no right to sell off in the first place. She said nothing about it during the election campaign. 80% of Ontarians or more are firmly against selling off of Hydro One, and we just believe it's the right thing to do. How do we keep control of our electricity system if we've farmed it out or sold it off to the private sector?
Their argument is that may gain you more control over what was once a Crown Corporation, but it doesn't actually do anything specific to lower electricity prices. Is that true?
No, on the contrary. In fact, every case where we've seen privatization of the electricity system, and let's not forget, this started with Mike Harris on the generation side, with the Conservative government started deregulating electricity and privatizing the generation. Now we're into the transmission of electricity with the sell-off of Hydro One. Every time there's a sell-off of electricity to the private sector in terms of generation, transmission, whatever you have, prices go up, the costs go up. And that's not just the NDP saying that. I mean, that is borne out in clear studies, whether you're talking about California, whether you're talking about other jurisdictions. Every single time there's a privatization in electricity, the costs go up.
So you're 110% confident that prices would come down if we, the province, reacquired Hydro One.
Well, and there's a number of other things, though. I mean, let's face it, we have overgeneration, so we have an oversupply of electricity that we have to deal with. When we do have oversupply, we basically give that electricity away. In fact, we pay other jurisdictions technically to take it off our hands in some points because it's sold off on the spot market. There's no system to make sure we get the best price. price. We're also heading down a path for even further generation of electricity, even though we don't need it at this point in time. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that system. We would also actually get rid of mandatory time of use pricing. Mandatory time of use pricing has not worked. It's punished people for making dinner at dinner time, and it's not shifted the load of electricity consumption in the massive way that the government had expected. That's going to cause prices to go down as well. So our plan is about a minimum of about 30% reduction in costs we will see, but we will also, over the long term, not have the spikes based on the privatization of Hydro One that we will see with this scheme that the Liberals have put in place.
We've got about a minute left here, and I want to ask you this. The NDP in the province of Ontario has not won an election since 1990. That's 27 years now. And I want to know, as you travel the province and you look around, what's out there in terms of evidence that leads you to believe that for the first time in more than a quarter of a century, the public is willing to entertain the notion that you guys are an option?
Well, you know, it's a matter of just watch us. I mean, look, we believe that we will be a serious choice for people in the next campaign. Folks are very unhappy with the Liberal government. And as you see, Kathleen Wynne is, trying to be one kind of premier before she gets elected and then another kind of premier after she gets elected. With us, the things that we believe in are things that we believe in before an election and after an election. They're not things that change just because an election's taking place. So whether that's the importance of our crown corporations and the value they have to our public, whether that's making sure that we have a pharmacare plan, whether that's a $15 minimum wage, all of these things are in our DNA. Before elections and after elections, we don't change our mind on these things just because we happen to be falling in the polls or we see an election coming in the next year or so. And that's not the case with Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals. So we do believe that we have ideas that make life better for people, that really focus on the issues that people are concerned about. People believe that government should be on their side all the time, not just before an election or not just when you're diving in the polls. And we think that we have a number of ideas that will make life better for folks, that will turn government back into an agent for change for people. Government should be about making life better for people all the time, not about making things good for your friends at the top or your well-connected party members and top folks on Bay Street. It should be about everyone, and that's not what we've seen here. We've seen for 14 years a government that's done very, very well by their friends in high places, but everybody else is paying the price.
That's Andrea Horwath, leader of the Ontario NDP. We're grateful you came into TVO tonight, and of course
I can't believe it's over already.
We'll see you in that chair again before long, because the campaign's not that far away.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.